Welcome to Software Testing Unleashed, the podcast for testers, developers, and all project people who want to build great and quality software. My name is Richie, software quality coach, keynote speaker, author, and podcaster. Today I have an episode recorded in Copenhagen at the Quality Beacon conference. My guest was Line Ebdrup Thomsen. She is a quality engineering manager, and her passion is to help making better software which is truly customer and end-user centric. We talked about women in tech and women in testing. What are the challenges for women in the tech industry, and how can we motivate more women and girls to join the tech industry and software testing? Enjoy the episode. Hi, Line. Great to have you here on the show.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, we are here at Quality Beacon, the Danish software testing conference. Day 2 is nearly at the end. It was a great day with a lot of good speeches out there and a good keynote. And the last keynote is just coming after our talk. And a few minutes ago, there was this panel discussion about women in testing. It was sponsored by the ISTQB, and you were a part of this panel discussion. And this is a topic I want to also mention in my podcast here too, because when I remember my first times in the software testing, my first company, there were about 100 testers, and half about were women and half about were men. And I was so excited because in testing, maybe we don't have a problem there with the balance, but maybe we have, but that we will clarify now. So what is your opinion about women in IT or in software development or in testing? How do you see this perspective?
Yeah, I think it's. I mean, I can definitely see a change from when I graduated and then got my first job to now, like the division of men and women in IT and also in testing specifically. I feel like there's more in testing than if you look at like developers, but that's also, it's both in both places, at least in Denmark. I feel like it's increasing. And there's more women now, but just like it, and it's moving in a direction. But so I think one of the first projects I had, we were around. It grew when I was there, but we were around 30 people. It was an IT project, and it was data engineers, and it was developers, and then I was the single tester. Yeah. And I think we were only 3 women out of 30 or something on that project. They were female. And in the beginning, you don't think about it. Then at some point, you're like, actually, we're just 3, right? Women in this. So I was this single tester on that project, and I was the one that one source of truth, one source of knowledge, and then I was the one that had to teach everyone what testing was. And that's different, at least now I see in projects. I feel like the division is more maybe 25 or 23 or something, I think was also said in there, like women in like these test roles, and there's definitely more women in testing than men. So it's happening, and I think it's changing, and I think your 50-50 is that's
a company where I work for.
Yeah, and when was this? What year was this? I was just surprised by.
It was my first job in an Austrian company. And, there were about 50 testers, 100 testers, and 50 men and 50 women. So maybe I get luck.
Yeah, maybe you did, but at least for me it's an impressive statistic, especially because it's not a newer story. It was in the beginning of your career, right? So yeah.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Wow. This was a long time ago, at the beginning of my career.
I won't, I'm not going to go into that. You said it.
Yeah, I said it. What do you think? When we look at we see that in testing are more women than in software development. Why testing? What skills do you think? Well, why is there more women in testing than in other branches of the software industry?
It's a good question. I think, at least I feel like sometimes it's also a lot of I think people end up, at least in Denmark, you end up kind of random in testing because we don't have a degree that qualifies you to do software testing. So sometimes it's developers that ended up in testing, like, or it's people that did various degrees that, like, just like myself, randomly ends up in software testing. It was not something when I started my studies. I was like, I'm going to be in testing. Like I said at the panel discussion, I thought I was going to do user research, but then found out, that actually testing was a lot more for me and a lot more my field and what I wanted to do. And why does more women? I think it's some of it. I also think if you have maybe if you're a manual tester and you come from maybe more of like a business domain knowledge, then they become testers, and then maybe they're more or diverge into maybe more technical testing along the way. At least I feel like that's often the story I see when it's like older testers. That's how they end up. It's either developers that ended up in testing because they were like, I started doing development, but then I didn't like it as much as like the testing part. I liked more like the reviewing part and the picking things apart than I liked the development, and then they develop that skill instead. Why it's like that, I think, like we talked about, and I don't know if it's a systemic thing that also changed the way that we view what is appropriate and what is a good degree and so on. So I think it's a hard question to answer, and I think we're definitely seeing more women also in software development, and I feel like it's also about, I mean, to me at least, software development and testing, it's a creative thing, right? Where you get to in testing, you get to imagine what can go wrong. And in the same way in software development, right, you need to imagine how can we build things. And I think often like the more creative subject is what you think women do, and then men do more like hardcore technology and STEM things. And I think it's also about like viewing. Like for me at least, it's creative to do both like development, but then also testing. You have to imagine what can go wrong, how can we test it, and so on.
That reminds me of one podcast episode a few weeks ago with Isabel Evans. She did a survey with her PhD work about the background of software testing, the diversity in testing. She found out that a lot of background of the people who got into testing is completely different from any other. There are arts, there are people who do planting, gardening, all this stuff. And maybe this is also one why we have more women in testing than in other aspects. Because we need different perspectives when we do software quality stuff.
Exactly. It really builds on, I had, so I did a lot of recruiting in the previous company that I worked with. It was also consulting. And I was asked to do a presentation for our recruitment department, and it was both the people that sat with this test, but also more generally like every role that we were hiring for. And they were like, can you please do a presentation about like both what should we look for in recruitment, but also what do you do? Because we're recruiting for a job that we don't have ourselves. So can you explain a little bit about that? And so I sat down, and one of the things I said is like, it doesn't matter what degree you have. Because I've seen, like, I have a really good colleague that had studied it was not biology, it was geology. So like it was like stones. What does that have to do with testing? But I think it's more her mindset and her way of thinking that made her such a good, she was a really good test manager and is a good test manager. And so I was like, for me, that makes I wouldn't have anticipated that if you studied that you would be a good test manager. I also have people who have like software backgrounds, so they studied music and cultural understanding, and they were such a good tester. And I was like, how is this? Like, it has nothing to do with degree. I think it's something about being curious, right? The curiosity and wanting to understand and take things apart. I had a grandfather that he bought things to take them apart. Like a computer, he was like, I wanted to know what was inside. So he took them apart and looked at that. And that's one of the things I said, you need to be curious and want to take things apart. You need to be good at communicating, because if you can't communicate, you can't tell people we can't go live, or we should make this decision and make people understand where we're at in terms of quality. And so I did the presentation, and they were like, thank you, and we're happy for the presentation. And then a few days later, one of them came over, I think it was a Christmas party or something. She came over, she tapped me on the shoulder, and she was like, I just want to say thank you for a really good presentation. And she was like, and now everyone in recruitment, they want to do testing. They're like, that's a cool job. Okay. So cool what you do, and we didn't know, and like everyone wants to do that now. And I was like, wow, that's I'm glad that it came across, and I'm glad that they understood, what is it we do. And then also like that degree,
Yeah.
It can be anything.
Yeah. I think another benefit which comes to my mind now is you mentioned communication, and when I think of a job of a tester is typically people business to
Yes.
get in contact with all the stakeholders from DevOps, from business, from development, to ask a lot of questions, to ask a lot of questions maybe not aligned with the main side of the project or something like that, but also be very empathic with the people you
Yes.
talk to. And I think that are all skills which have women much better than men.
At least I had, I think there was a presentation. I watched one of the women in testing, at least some of them, some of the recorded presentations online before. And Amanda, that was actually in the panel with me, did a presentation. And one of the things she said that really struck with me was that you need to be assertive but kind. I think it's such a good catchphrase, and the understanding of being, firm and assertive, but also being soft and kind. Because, like you said, you have to critique other people's work, and you need to do it with kindness and in a specific way. Otherwise, we will now be in conflict, right? So understanding how I get my message across to you, and that you understand that we're building a product together. I'm not attacking you as a person or your professionalism or your skills in any way. It's us together building a product, and I think that ability is so important. Also with like explaining status, where are we at, what is, can we go live, what is the quality like for the product, is just so key of what we're doing, and it's such an important part, and you need to be really good at that, because otherwise can we go live, like where are we at, and it's a really important skill to have. And I think I've been told by some colleagues, like, you can get away with saying things that if I said exactly the same thing you did, people would kill me.
Yeah.
But somehow, and it's men who often said to me, somehow you can get away with it. And they're like, I don't understand. And I think part of it is being kind and assertive, that people know I'm not attacking them, but I'm also being like,
Yeah, that's true.
this is what we need to do, right? So I think that's, at least for me, that really struck with me. And I think it was such a good way of describing it that is so simple as well.
Yeah. Did you face in your career, which challenges did you face in this main directed branch like IT and tech stuff? Or do you see any challenges at your clients or at the companies you work where women did not get the space and the place they can do the right things?
I spend a lot of, I think it's women, but it's also maybe testers. If you're the single tester in a team of developers or people who have the same skill set, then you understand what each other does. And if you're the only person, right? So if you're the only woman, or if you're the only tester and there's few of you, you need to be able to advocate for yourself and for quality in this case, right? And I do a lot of like trying to help and to coach my testers in doing that. So standing up for themselves and standing up for quality. And I think that goes, of course, beyond gender. But I think sometimes the assumption can also be, and it's a silly assumption, but that because you're a tester and because you're a woman, you may be less capable of understanding technology, or less about this, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes I think you need to spend some time on breaking that barrier down.
Yeah.
And you shouldn't let it, if people assume that, you can't control what other people assume, but you can of course tell yourself that this is, they might assume this, but it's not the truth.
Yeah.
And you can convince them, and it might take some time, but you will get there.
Yeah.
So like explaining to them and telling them and showing them that you do know technology and that you do understand what the project is about, or whatever it is that they're assuming that you can't do, is it's important to spot, and then try and work with breaking down. So I at least try to really coach my testers for this, because it will happen, male, female. If you're a tester and you're the only person in the team, then you also feel responsible for this, right? So I think it's an important thing to do as well.
I think maybe this is also the problem. If you're the one woman in the project, you need a lot of courage to go against this man-dominated area, and it's even more than if you're just one tester in the team. And this courage is better done when you have a good coach or a mentor in the team. Do you see any differences in the generations of leaders and project managers when it comes to how to deal with women in testing or software development? So we have the picture of the old white man who are doing just the things if for gender balancing only if they are forced to. But what about new leaders? Is it going better? Is there an improvement, or do we still have to do a lot of work in there for the young leaders too?
I think it varies. I think the new leaders are more aware of this because it's just been a topic there, maybe growing up and through education, it's been more of a topic than at least it's been before, right? So I think some of them are more aware. Whether they act different, I'm not sure. Let's see. But at least it's something I think where and being aware is important. And I think some think that we are past it. We solved it. There's no gap anymore. At least that's sometimes the thing we talk about in Denmark. That people are like, job done, we finished it, so we equal now, and there's still things you see where it's different, right? And I think people are still aware, and I think there's different opinions on this, right? Some people feel like they're done, we don't have to talk about it. The previous generation took care of it, so I don't have to think about it. And then there are people I think that are very aware and trying to think about, how is it for my female colleagues, or can I do more to be an advocate, and so on. I saw it in Accenture, like I think we had this. I think it was on. We had an event where it was about women, of course, in technology, and then you had to give an award to the best ally, and the guy who got the reward was really he was really humble, and he was like, I don't feel like I deserve this award. Like, I don't feel like I'm doing something extra.
Yeah.
He said, I just feel like I'm doing what everyone should be doing. Like, this is not, I'm not doing something extra. I just feel like I'm doing the bare minimum, right?
Yeah.
So for him, it was like, what? And I think for the people working with him, they felt like he was actually doing that, right?
Yeah.
So I think he's one of the people who are maybe very aware of like how he is a leader for both men and women, and how he makes it equal and feels equal to be in his team. So I think that was, at least for me, was very like eye-opening, that he was like, I don't feel like I'm deserving. I don't do anything extra. I just try to make it, neutral. And I think if that actually is how people feel working with you, then you've really accomplished something.
Yeah. Do you have any tips for female testers to empower themselves in a team or in a project? What can they do if they hear the podcast and say, okay, I have a lot of work to do in my team that I get seen or something like that? What tips would you give them?
Yeah, so one of the things, like I also talked about it on the panel discussion, is I feel like sometimes I do it too. Yeah, I hold myself back. There's this little voice that starts saying something, but that voice you can talk to that voice, and that make me sound like I talk to myself. But it's more that that thought of like, oh, can I do this, or should I do this, or am I good enough, or is this and you can talk to that voice and tell it that this is like I said, you don't get offered things that people don't think that you can do, right? So saying yes and taking a chance. I mean, this was my first panel discussion. I've also never done this before.
Yeah.
So taking a chance and trying something out. And if you don't like it, you just don't do it again.
Yeah.
So I think taking a chance with things is important. And then trial and error, right? Then you try it, and then you get some feedback on maybe how you can change things and do something different. And then the assertive and kind thing, I think, is important. I think sometimes you can maybe fall into the role of like maybe trying to step back a little bit, and I think it's important to speak your mind, and you can do that with kindness, and then still be like assertive of like what it is you want to have done. So I think that thing I would really encourage. And then one of the things I also mentioned on the panel discussion is one of the things that I didn't know that I was doing, which was good for my career, because I like my job and I'm really passionate about what I'm doing, and maybe also because I've been in a lot of projects where I've been a single tester. Then I like talking about what I'm doing. I like talking about what I want to do, something new I read about, or something I think we should do in the future, or where I want to go and what I want to do. And because of this, then my managers knew what I wanted to do and what my dreams were and what I wanted to do next. So they knew what my skills were and what my dreams were and where I wanted to go. And because of this, it's easier to give me what I want.
Yeah.
And it was something that I didn't think about that I was doing. And then at some point it occurred to me, it's because I talk about what I'm doing. This happened, or I achieved this, or we're trying to do this, or I read this really cool article about something, right? Then you get to understand what it is both testing is about, what I'm doing, and also where I want to go next. Maybe I want to be a team lead or something else where I get more management responsibility. So I think talking about what it is you want to do, but also talking about what you're doing and finding that place, because I'm an extrovert, so it's of course easier for me than if you're an introvert, but you can still talk about what you're doing and be an introvert. You just have to find your own way of doing it. And it's not bragging, it's just talking about, what you're passionate about.
Yeah.
And I think that's okay.
Yeah, sounds very, very good tips. When we look at the future of testing, and especially women in testing, what skills do you need? What do you think need female testers in the future more than men testers need, maybe?
What we need more than male testers. And in the future, I think Claudia said it really well on but that's maybe a general thing, that being curious about what's going on. There's a lot of technology is moving fast, right? If you look away from AI and look back, then it's moved so far. So keep being curious and keep learning new stuff and picking new stuff up. I think and then
Maybe there are the same challenges for male and for female. Yeah. Line, when a young girl will come now to you and says, Line, why should I become a software tester? What would you say?
I would say maybe you shouldn't. No, I would say, of course, it depends. But I would talk about again what it is I like about it, and then maybe they like something different. But like I said, the curiosity of if you're curious and if you like taking things apart, if you like the community, because I also feel like you said with testing, you're in that wonderful space of technology and people, and then some business domain. And if you like the diversity of going, some is technology, some is more people management and people skills, and then something is learning a new domain. And if you think that that difference in your work is interesting, then maybe testing is for you. Because we have a lot of that, and that's also I think one of the things that I personally really enjoy. So if that's for you, and then also if you don't mind speaking up and being the one that says this is where we're at, or this is what's going on, and giving other people feedback on their work in a kind way, then maybe testing is for you, and the creativity as well, right? I think it's a cool and a fun job. And I think we get way less credit than we should get.
Yeah, that's but it is a very cool job. I agree with that totally. Line, thank you very much for the interview here, and you answered my questions here in the podcast. I think it's a huge value for the community. They get some insights and maybe some things to think about in the future when dealing with different testers and developers in the team. So thank you very much. I wish you a great rest of the conference.
Thank you.
And hope to see you soon.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah.